Hello again. I do hope that viewers of this channel have not gained the impression that I'm an old-fashioned or intolerant sort of person. I think that I'm as with it as the next man, although I do have certain ideas about roles which some might find a little outdated. I'm not talking about gender roles or anything of that kind because these are none of my business. I'm thinking rather of the role of the police, which I see as keeping the peace and deterring crime. I would like to be sure that police officers, whose wages I do after all pay, are spending their time profitably. By this I mean that they are learning about the law and also about technical stuff, like protecting a scene of crime or taking statements or fingerprints. Other than that, I would like to know that they are patrolling the streets and trying to catch criminals. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, especially in the view of the fact that 95% of crimes in Britain do not result in anybody being charged, let alone convicted of anything. Why is that, do you suppose? The simple answer is that the police these days have far more important things to be doing than preserving the peace or tracking down criminals. One force in particular, that in the county of Norfolk, is spending a lot of time and money making sure that their officers are aware of all the modern fads and crazes relating to sex. The thumbnail to this video shows a document used on a course which all police officers in Norfolk have to attend. It's of a genderbread person and explains the difference between people's affections, their gender identity, who they want to screw, that sort of stuff. Stuff which, it might be of interest, I suppose, of minority interest, but probably not necessary when you're trying to set out to catch a car thief or a burglar or murderer. The course that they're all being sent on explains to them the bewildering variety of sexes, genders and sexualities which they may encounter. Of course, none of this should make any difference. If a grey asexual, that is to say somebody who experiences sexual attraction rarely and on a very low scale, is burgled by a gynosexual, that's a person who is attracted to those with a feminine gender presentation, then the important thing really ought to be catching the burglar, whatever he or she feels about his or her sex life or gender. Nor do I see that the gender or sexuality of the person whose home has been broken into really has much to do with the case. Nevertheless, police officers in Norfolk are now expected to be familiar with no fewer than 37 different genders and sexualities. I dare say that the only greys that some of you know about are those creepy aliens with big almond eyes who abduct people and take them to flying saucers from time to time. But greys are an important category to know about when you're fretting about gender. There is the grey gender, which is people who have a weak gender identification of themselves. Then there are pansexual, demisexuals, androsexuals, and vari-oriented, which is when your sexual and romantic orientation do not target the same set of genders. No, I don't understand what that means either, but it's in the training material for the police in Norfolk. Of course, even once they have mastered all these various and complicated categories and make sure that they know the bi-curious from the gender apathetic, which are, by the way, two genuine types of person, there are still many pitfalls to avoid. A lot of these involve transsexuals, and in the description to this video I give a link to a document from Norfolk Police which goes into great detail in how to deal with transsexuals and their misfortunes. What happens, for example, if you arrest a transsexual? Can you just get on and search them and forget about their personal predilections as regards clothing or cosmetics? Of course not, you fool. Under the heading Dealing with Trans People, we read that the principles detailed below relate to transgender persons who are in custody. So it is that officers' staff should establish his or her preferred gender and whether this corresponds with his or her current identity records. This should be done sensitively, preferably avoiding the direct question, are you a man or woman? Heaven forbid that you should run the risk of offending or upsetting somebody whom you have just arrested for rape or murder. There are special sensitivities around searching transgender people. Even the removal of outer clothing can prove extremely embarrassing to some transgender people. For example, a transsexual man may still have breasts which become apparent when a jacket is removed. Additional privacy should be afforded if at all possible, and officers should be aware that a transgender person may have an understandable reason for being reluctant to cooperate with a search. Yes, some people who have been arrested for a crime are certainly reluctant to be searched, sometimes because they're carrying drugs or deadly weapons, of course. But if they are transsexual, you must pussyfoot around a lot more. After ploughing through this document and the other pages, which are part of the training in gender issues that the Norfolk Police are obliged to undergo, we begin to have some inkling of why the clear-up rate for all crime in this country is so shockingly low. Rather than being occupied in learning how to track down those who have broken into our houses or stolen cars, officers are being educated in the best way not to upset or offend those whom they have arrested, in case they turn out to be demisexuals or greys. In other words, instead of concerning themselves with the basic essentials of policing, many forces have wandered off along a side track which has led them to an obsessive interest in minority sexual practices. Now that might make a nice hobby for them to pursue when they're off duty, in which case it would be harmless, although a little bit weird and creepy. When studying the wide variety of human perversion is part of the job, what they're being paid to do, I think it's reasonable for us, the public, to raise our eyebrows and ask if this is the best use of a police officer's time. Like most people, I find it shocking that only 1 in 20 crimes are solved, and would be pleased if it could be increased, perhaps until the majority of crimes are cleared up. A good beginning to this might be abandoning all this stuff about transsexuals, pansexuals, demisexuals and polysexuals and getting on with what matters to us as citizens and taxpayers. That is to say, catching criminals.